There have been lots of clinicians that I have hired along the way that it was like, great, you're a good clinician and I want to hire you. And it was that simple. And I am now at a place where that is like the baseline. Personality and culture matter almost more now. So we have actually totally renovated the way that we do our hiring process to make sure that we're finding people that vibe with our culture and are a right fit.
This episode is sponsored by TherapyNotes, TherapyNotes.com. Be sure and check them out and be sure and use the promo code Gordon, Gordon, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. Over 15 years ago, when I started my private practice, I had to learn a lot, and most of it the hard way, and I don't think you need to do the same. Hi, I'm Gordon Brewer, a licensed psychotherapist, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. Join me in this journey of discovery as we have conversations with other leaders and professionals in both the mental and allied health fields. Join us as we explore both the business and clinical sides of running a private practice. And welcome to the podcast. This is episode number 344 of the Practice of Therapy podcast, and I'm Gordon Brewer. So glad you've joined us and so glad you're listening to the podcast, and I hope you'll take time to follow us or subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. So, looking forward to you hearing from my guest, Rachel Harrison. And Rachel is no stranger to podcasting in that her podcast, The Mental Health Entrepreneur, is part of the Psychcraft network. And so I'd invite you to go over and check out her podcast. But in this episode, we jump into talking about how she has grown her practice and also created a specific trauma. Her specific niche is trauma, and pretty much her whole practice deals with trauma almost exclusively. And so I'm looking forward to you hearing her story and how she built that and how she landed, as I like to say, how she's landed where she's landed. But Rachel is a lot of fun. I get to hang out with her a few times at different conferences. And I'm really looking forward to you getting to hear more from Rachel in this particular episode. Before we get to my conversation with Rachel, one of the things I'd love for you to do is check out my friend Ashley's online store, mentalhealthwaretn.com. And she has created an online store that sells everything concerning, not everything, but most of the t-shirts you might be looking for, or clothing or apparel dealing with mental health awareness or mental health professions. So be sure and check it out, mentalhealthwaretn.com. And if you'll use the promo code, just simply take20, you can get 20% off on your first order. So be sure and check it out. And also, before we get to my conversation with Rachel, I'd love for you to hear from one of the members of the Psychcraft network, along with some words from our sponsor of the podcast, TherapyNotes, and also a little bit about Gusto, which is a platform that I use in helping me with payroll. So stay tuned. You know, as you grow your practice, one of the things that comes up is, how do you pay your people? You know, when I started my group practice, one of the things I had to figure out was how to do payroll. You've got not only how to pay the people, write their checks for them, but also if they are employees, how are you going to withhold FICA and Social Security and all those things? Plus, if you want to provide benefits, such as health insurance or a 401k or any of those kinds of things, it's really pretty complicated. But I found a solution, and that solution is Gusto. And it's what I use in my practice now. It is an all-in-one system that handles your payroll, helps you provide benefits. It pays your taxes for you all in one place. And doing payroll is never simpler than with Gusto. It only takes me about 10 to 15 minutes to do my payroll every time I do it. So I'd love for you to go check it out. You can go to practiceoftherapy.com/gusto to find out more about that particular platform. I'm always recommending it to the people that I consult with, and I think you would like it as well. Also, if you are just paying contractors, they do that as well. They will also send out your 1099s for you. So be sure and check it out. practiceoftherapy.com/gusto.
Hi, I'm Whitney Owens. If you don't know me, I am the person behind the Wise Practice podcast, which is part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. I am so proud to be a part of this network along with my good friend Gordon Brewer, who's doing such amazing work on helping people on their practice journey. If you haven't discovered the Wise Practice podcast yet, you can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. I'd love for you to join us as we explore how to grow a faith-based practice that brings you the income you need and the lifestyle you want. Be sure to check out the podcast and other helpful information at whitneyowens.com.
Ready to upgrade your practice from a rusty bicycle to a shiny new sports car? Buckle up, because TherapyNotes is here to turbocharge your journey. It's the comprehensive practice management system you've been craving, equipped with everything you need to navigate patient records, schedule seamlessly, host remote sessions, craft detailed notes, and tackle insurance billing with ease. And guess what? It's your trusty sidekick, available whenever and wherever duty calls. Picture having more quality time with your clients, all thanks to this digital assistant that never clocks out. Here's the kicker. It's Gordon approved, so you can trust it's the real deal. Bid farewell to paperwork headaches and embrace a new era of efficiency and top-tier care. Ready to level up your private practice game? Swing by practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes and punch in promo code GORDON for 2 months on the house. Enjoy the show.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. And I'm real excited for you all to get to know Rachel Harrison. And Rachel is a fellow podcaster, and her podcast is part of the Psychcraft network. So, Rachel, welcome.
Thank you. So glad to chat. Love talking about all things entrepreneurship and private practice.
As I start with everyone, Rachel, tell everybody a little more about yourself and how you've landed where you've landed.
Yeah, that's been an interesting journey. So I started out as a solo practitioner working in residential home-based therapy, all kinds of things like that. Eventually landed in solo practice. So I've been a therapist for 26 years now. Did solo practice for a long time. My kids were little. That was a great thing for kind of that time in my life. And then after about 10 years of solo practice, I decided to take the leap into private practice group practice. I was in Durango, Colorado at the time. So I started Durango Family Therapy, and that was a group practice in that location, and then ended up moving to Maryland, where I had been before, Frederick, Maryland. And so telehealth was a thing then, but not nearly as big as now. So for about a year and a half, I continued to run that practice virtually and kind of started up some in-person practice for myself here in Maryland. Then decided to sell that practice. So got to have that experience of selling a practice, which was pretty cool. And then started this practice. So when I sat down in 2015, 2016, said, what do I want to do? I really wanted to do trauma. Trauma has been a specialty of mine. EMDR is something I've been trained in for lots of years, and I'm actually an EMDR trainer. And so I wanted to incorporate that, and my vision was having a practice where everyone was trained to treat trauma excellently, really well, and EMDR was going to be a part of that. So that's kind of how I got here.
Mm-hmm.
Developed this practice. We've grown for the last 8 years and also developed a training institute along the way. Then got interested in creative and innovative things that I think we desperately need in this field. And so that was the
Mm-hmm.
curiosity that launched the podcast. So that's kind of the short, concise version of how I got here.
Yeah, it's amazing, and I got to spend some time with Rachel up in Kentucky at Meet You in Kentucky. The people have
Mm-hmm.
heard me speak about here, but I think the other thing too, as we were chatting about before we started recording, is just in running group practice or just any practice for that matter, whether it's solo or group, large group, small group. There are times when you just have to pivot and do
Mm.
things differently. And we were just talking about some of that process for you here recently.
Yeah, absolutely. So recently I had my first kind of leadership member of my team, my practice manager, move on. And that was actually a process I'm pretty proud of. It was very open communication, what she was looking for, what I needed, and figuring out that those things didn't necessarily match anymore, even though they were fabulous for a long time. And so helping her move on well and then helping us transition into a new person. But that has required me to dig into the practice in ways that I have not been doing for years and years because I've had other people running things like billing and payroll and HR functions and things like that. So I'm in a learning curve again. And that's what I
Mm-hmm.
was saying to Gordon as we were talking. There are so many different seasons of growth. And I think having done private practice for so many years, but then group practice also for so many years, every season looks different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. As you have grown and tell folks maybe a little more about your current practice and how you've got it structured. And it sounds like you must have a phenomenal staff to be able to juggle all the things.
That's true. It hinges very much on the right staff. And yes, boy, and I came into this accidentally. So just to speak that too to people that, I didn't have this great master plan of where my practice was going to be and what I wanted and everything. And that's sort of been a process along the way. I always say I kind of bumbled into it. Like I just asked one person if they wanted to come do some contract hours with me. And then that was the start. Evolving from there, learning from people like you and other group practice owners, having an accountability group, all those things. But we are structured in 3 different states. And I kind of have this practice model because we focus on trauma. We really want people to feel very comfortable and not like they're coming into a medical clinic. So we have designed smaller sites in order to sort of meet that vibe. And so you
Mm-hmm.
come in and you feel like you're sitting in a waiting room, or a living room, like I think a lot of therapy offices are. But I have grown it, I would say, based on people,
Mm-hmm.
100%. So having people that I saw could be leaders and developing them into those roles. And then even our multi-state location was honestly by accident, both of them.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in Maryland, Delaware, and PA. We started in Maryland, and a colleague of mine from Maryland had moved to Delaware, and she said, would you want to open a practice in Delaware? I think it'd be really cool. And I was like, I don't even know. That was my first
Mm-hmm.
thought, right? But
Yeah.
let's talk about it. So she is a phenomenal leader, and she kind of spearheaded that. It's about 3 hours away from me, so I could not have done it without having that person, to your
Mm-hmm.
point, of
Yeah.
being able to develop that. And then in Pennsylvania, since I train people in EMDR, I've met lots of people, and it was a practice there that said, we like your values, we do the same work that you do, and we are shutting down. It was actually a nonprofit that was shutting down, and would you want to hire our staff and develop a site here? So that's what we did last year.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, it's interesting how I was just thinking it's, I think we hear a lot, you've got to have a plan, you've got to have goals, you've got to have dreams, all that kind of stuff, and follow all those things and have it all kind of ironed out in your head. But the truth of the matter is it can change from day to day.
So much.
Oh yeah, and I love the fact that you've kind of, I don't know if stumble is a good word, but stumbled into a lot of stuff that's turned out to be good things. And I know for me, that's been kind of what's kind of happened for me as well in my practice. I mean, I've gotten, but the other thing to your point, Rachel, is finding the right people is just huge. I mean, just finding the people that have the vibe that you're looking for and the feeling and that sort of thing, I think goes a long way in building a stable practice at least.
It really does. And, learning by experience, there have been lots of clinicians that I have hired along the way that it was like, great, you're a good clinician and I want to hire you. And it was that simple. And I am now at a place where that is definitely not necessarily, that's like the baseline. Like, you're a good clinician and I want to hire you. And for me, personality and culture matter almost more now. So we have actually totally renovated the way that we do our hiring process to make sure that we're finding people that vibe with our culture and are a right fit, because it's just tough when somebody's looking for something different than the practice culture. And I think the beauty of that is also what I would kind of speak to, this abundance mentality mindset, if you will. I think this is where practices can support each other, because the clinician that's the right fit for my practice, Gordon, may not be the right fit for yours. And understanding that if someone's a wrong fit, they're going to struggle, and you might also struggle with them. And it's going to be this process that takes everybody a lot of time and energy, versus that right fit person flows into the role. They have the capacity to do it, and we tend to just cruise right along. And so I don't think there are these magical clinicians that are just the good ones that everybody wants, so to speak, to hire.
Right.
I really think it's about fit. I think it's about culture. I think it's about the type of clinicians that you have in your practice already that are going to attract similar clinicians. And, for us being an EMDR practice, that's a big piece. Do you want to treat trauma? Because if you don't, this isn't the spot for you.
Right. Yeah. And so you want to speak to how you kind of developed your niche and what that's been like, as far as, I think people hear all the time, and I know I've said it, is, it's so important to create a niche for yourself in this business, in this world of mental health. And you want to speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. That was actually a really scary moment for me, because my first group practice, by the name, it was just like a general practice, right? I was kind of like, that's just what you do. And my solo practice was also a general practice. And so I think for me, I really didn't have a lot of the business training and the people that said, do a niche, do a niche. I completely think it was a great idea looking back, but I remember sitting there that day at my desk with that paperwork, filling out the LLC, right? And in my head, I was like, I want to call this Practice Trauma Specialist of Maryland, because I want a practice of trauma specialist, which of course is a niche. But it was very scary, because at the time in 2016, there were not a lot of, nobody was using the word trauma therapist, and there was no real specialty in that area. And so it felt risky. Like, am I going to get clients? Are people even going to reach out to me? Because they are like, I don't have trauma, so you can't help me with my anxiety. And so it was a big risk, but it has been a way that has definitely paid off. And I think people have a very clear sense of why they come here. And I do think if you're a generalist practice, that's great too. But I think having a niche has really helped us hone in on the right fit clients and the right fit therapists as well. and really give us a clear mission of what we're doing and why. And so highly recommend it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's the thing too that I'm betting is one reason why you have what you have is that the people you're hiring are also passionate about treating trauma,
Mm-hmm.
and I would say that would be true for anybody in private practice, whether you're solo or whatever it is that you find get are passionate about, the issues that you just kind of light up and you just really kind
Mm.
of nerd out about, that's your niche, and that
Right.
would be the thing to go for. And people are you're going to do better work, you're going to have happier people if you're hiring people, all of that sort of thing all the way around.
Definitely. And for me, EMDR was a very magical learning experience as a
Yeah,
clinician.
it's witchcraft. It really is.
Everybody says that, I know. And I fell so much in love with it that I became a trainer. And I have to tell you, my personal bias is I think every clinician needs to know how to do it.
Mhm.
Whether you're a trauma therapist or not, we all bump into that in our work.
Right.
So that was a factor relating to this too, was like, I really want to practice where we train everybody in EMDR. And that's
Hmm.
our kind of common ground treatment. So I think the other thing that's beautiful about that is when we have our consultation groups and things like that as clinicians together, there is this really nice common language of how
Yes.
we treat people. And I've been in consultation groups before that have like more of a mix of different people from different perspectives. And that can be valuable too, certainly. But I think for aligning a team and moving in the same direction, it's been really great to have the same treatment model that we're all using.
Right. Right. Yeah. So tell us more about how you've kind of, when you moved into doing the Mental Health Entrepreneur podcast and the Training Institute, how did all that evolve for you?
That's an awesome question. It kind of goes back to that theme of seasons of leading and developing, right? Because I started the Trauma Specialist Training Institute in 2021 when my practice was at a place where I was not really spending very much time working on it at all. I was supporting the leaders that were running it, and I was definitely doing more of that visionary kind of planning work with it. But I had some free time. And so like every entrepreneur that has a little free time, we get ourselves into trouble, right?
Hmm.
And the trouble that I got into was developing the Training Institute. And I had learned so much on the business side of how I wanted to do things differently. So I started that very differently. I hired people, and I've heard you say this on your podcast, I've hired people much faster to do the things instead of trying to do all of the things myself and take that longer
Hmm.
process. So that started in 2021, and now that is up and running. We've actually recently, though it is a separate company, we've kind of merged our leadership of the two because they intersect so much in our most recent kind of organizational and accountability chart. So that's a new adventure. We're
Hmm.
learning as we go there. But the podcasting is always something I've been curious about. And I was in a leadership group here locally called Leadership Frederick County, and I decided to test out podcasting with that group. So I created a podcast called Leadership Evolution, where I interviewed all of the leadership locally about their
Hmm.
experiences, their lessons on leadership. So that was like my dipping the toe in the water. It was limited edition, but I loved it so much and loved the conversations that I just started thinking like what I might want to do with a podcast. And so I feel like we are at such a critical point in mental health right now. There are more clients that need help than we can help. And there are not enough therapists to go around. And we have this very limited, in general, I know some people are doing creative things, but in general, we've got outpatient care and we've got inpatient care. And I just started thinking, how do we support mental wellness in our communities that go outside of the box of standard what we're doing. So I just started looking for people to interview, and that it's been kind of this journey of me. Some people are therapists, some people are not. Yesterday, I was interviewing someone who is a consultant for neuroinclusion, for example, and how that supports mental wellness. So it's been really fun to learn and to interact with people. And that's kind of like I call it kind of my pet project. I'm sort of one of those people that I think this is typical for entrepreneurs. I'm always like thinking of new ideas, right? So it's like keeping my brain sort of interested in all the different pieces that I have going on, but that's what works for me.
Yeah, good. That's great. And I think that's kind of been similar to my journey too. It's just as I began to see fewer clients and doing more
Hmm.
administrative stuff, and just really got, yeah, as like you, just passionate about helping other therapists learn all of these things that, about running a practice, but, in your case with the EMDR stuff, just really capitalizing on all of that is just huge.
It
Yeah.
is. And I think
Yeah.
finding out, where we fit as individuals, right? For me,
Hmm.
I almost consider running this business my a second career. Like
Hmm.
I am a therapist technically by training, and I still see a client or two, but really I'm not a therapist. I'm a business owner now. And that's kind
Hmm.
of a different thing. It's a whole new learning curve. And
Right.
yeah, we're not taught that. As I
Hmm.
think I've heard people say on your podcast, right? We just
Hmm.
have to figure it out along the way, but it's a whole other investment in really, I've done a lot of business training and taking classes and really trying
Hmm.
to learn this field because it's still mental health, but it's running that business side. And I think in the mental health field, I don't know how long you've been in this field, but in the
Hmm.
26 years that I've done this work, things have changed so dramatically.
Yes.
And really, in the last 5 years, I would say that's been on like hyperdrive.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think it's taking a lot more of a business owner to be apprised of all of those things that are happening in the world around that affect us, whether it be insurance or legislation, where treatment and care models are moving, all of that. There's just so much change and so much going on. So I think it is a whole new world, really.
Right. Right. Yeah. Our journeys are very, very similar, very parallel. Like you, I started out in agency work, working for a nonprofit. And
Mm.
yeah, as I think back over the same amount of time, oh gosh, I started into the mental health world around 2001 or so.
Okay,
And
yeah.
and just looking at all the changes since then, it's
It's a
just,
lot.
it's a lot, and just totally different animal now than it was back then, for sure.
Hmm. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
we were happily sitting there doing our 50-minute sessions that we could
Hmm.
still bill at 90837 and writing
Yeah.
our notes in a folder, right? And
Yes.
that's really
Right.
what it was. And
All
there
right.
wasn't a whole lot going on besides that.
Right. Right. Tell folks how they can get in touch with you, the things that you offer, and the things that you've got going on.
I would love to have you check out the Mental Health Entrepreneur podcast. You can find that on any of your listening platforms. You can also find me at the Trauma Specialist Training Institute. So I can give the links to put in the show notes, but
Hmm.
www.traumaspecialisttraining.com, and you'll see training opportunities there. And if you're curious about my practice, you can go to the Trauma Specialists of Maryland or Trauma Specialists of Delaware or Trauma Specialists of PA website.
Awesome. So glad to have Rachel and her podcast part of the Sightcraft Network. So got to put a shout out for that as well.
I appreciate that. Like everything, it doesn't make sense to do it solo. You need a team of people that you can talk
Hmm.
to and that you can interact with and learn from
Yeah.
along the way. So I'm really happy to be a part of the
Yeah.
network, Gordon. Thanks for starting
Yeah.
that.
One of the things I'll say about Rachel that I noticed immediately is she is the master at delegating and having people do things for her that she doesn't need to be spending time on. And so I'm learning from her about that, about the necessity to outsource, especially as you grow. And that's the only way that can really grow effectively. I'm taking some notes. Taking some notes. Well, Rachel, I'm sure we'll have you back on the podcast, and looking
Lovely.
forward to more things down the road. Again, a big thanks to Rachel for joining me on the podcast. And I'm sure you'll be hearing from her some more here on this podcast. And her podcast is really a great one, The Mental Health Entrepreneur. But I really enjoyed us just talking about some of the changes we both have seen over the years in just our mental health field. And one thing I can say for sure is that life is constant change, and things will change some more as we move through. And I think it's important just to be able to embrace change and be able to continue doing what we're doing, because I feel like all of us in this profession are doing just some very noble work. And kudos to those of you listening that are doing this kind of work. So be sure and check out Rachel's things, and we'll hopefully have her back here on the podcast before too long. Also, be sure and check out mentalhealthwaretn.com and use the promo code TAKE20 and get 20% off your first order by going there. And also, big thanks to TherapyNotes for sponsoring the podcast. They are the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers. They're who I use in my practice and couldn't work without them. They have a platform that is second to none with the patient portal that they have, along with being able to file claims and being able to do all the billing and scheduling that you need to do within a practice. So be sure and check it out, practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes, and use the promo code Gordon, just GORDON, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. So give them go kick the tires and find out a little more about them. So looking forward to some more great guests and upcoming episodes. And do take time to subscribe to the podcast or follow the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. So take care, folks, and we'll be back with you again next week for the Practice of Therapy podcast. You've been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, part of the PsychCraft network of podcasts. You can find out more about the other great podcasts in the network by visiting psychcraftnetwork.com. And if you haven't done so already, please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com and get your free private practice startup guide, along with a lot of other great resources and webinars and free things just by visiting. Also, be sure to follow us wherever you might be listening to your podcasts. This podcast is intended to be educational in purpose and is not intended to give legal, accounting, or counseling advice. If you need a professional, find the right person for that.